Welcome to the SIP Certified How-To webinar. We're going to start with an overview of the program, the documents, the deadlines, the different costs, and then go into a tutorial of how to use the online database. So SIP Certified is a sustainable certification for vineyards, wineries, and wines. So we certify properties, which would be the vineyard and the winery, and then the product, which would be a wine. So that means if a wine's made with at least 85% SIP certified fruit, it can have the SIP certified logo on the bottle after completing a chain of custody inspection, and that helps your customers shop for sustainable wines. So vineyard and winery certification run on a similar schedule. The certification is annual. It starts December 1st and continues through November 30th. Inspections are done between June 1st and July 16th for 2018. Typically, that's July 15th. And it's important that all of the documentation is completed and reviewed by the inspector during that time frame. Otherwise, there is a potential late fee penalty for documentation turned in after those deadlines. Eligibility is determined in August at the Certification Advisory Committee. This group reviews inspection reports and verifies eligibility. Notification is sent between August and September, so that would be an eligibility letter and an invoice if the property is eligible for certification. And certification gets wrapped up in September and October with payment of those certification fees. The certification cycle starts again on December 1st, or for 2018, that is on December 3rd. The first falls on a weekend, and that's a really simple process that's done through the online database. And then there's one final thing that's due December 15th typically, but again for 2018, that's a weekend, so it's December 14th. And for vineyards, that's the submission of Question 911 pesticide use reports, so that would be your summer ones, June through November, that weren't seen during that original inspection. And also Chapter 14, which is year-end water and nitrogen calculations. And similar with the summer inspection, there are late fee penalties for documentation turned in after the fact, so it's important to get all of that turned in on time. So vineyard and winery inspection times. Inspections run on a 3-year cycle. So we have cycles 1, 2, and 3. Cycle 1 is always going to be a complete records and on-site inspection. Those records are reviewed in the online database by your inspector, and then they'll also come out on site and do a walk through the property itself. For properties that are certifying for the first time, these inspections usually take about 8 hours the first year. So that's the longest inspection that you'll have during your tenure within the certification program. Once you've gone through cycles 2 and 3 and you're back in cycle 1 again, so say that's your 4th year of certification, you'd have another complete records and on-site inspection, but it takes a lot less time. Those are usually 5 or 6 hours. And then so for those cycles 2 and 3, so that would be years 2 and 3 or 5 and 6, those are 2 different types of inspections you could have. You could have just an off-site documentation inspection, so those are items that are selected and noted in the online database each year. It's about 12 to 15 questions, and those are all reviewed off-site by your inspector. Some properties are also selected for a documentation on-site or that doc and on-site inspection. So they review those same 12 or 15 standards and questions in the database and then also do an on-site inspection. There's also going to be one property per year that's selected for the impromptu. So that impromptu is the same thing as a documentation on-site inspection, except you won't know that you're having an on-site inspection as well. It will look like a documentation inspection, and then you'll get a call from your auditor at least 48 hours in advance notifying you of that on-site inspection. Another note is that a company is subject to only one documentation, on-site, or impromptu inspection every 2 cycles, so 6 years. So if you're in your 2nd year of certification and you had that impromptu inspection, you're out of the running for another 6 years. Now let's talk about some of the documents for the program. All of this is housed at sipcertified.org. You would go to Get Certified and then down to Documents. And then also, it's in the online database, and I'll show you where all of that is located in just a minute. So the information package covers all of the guidelines and rules for the programs. It has applications to certify a vineyard, winery, and wines, all of the inspector contacts that are on there, along with style guides for how you can use the SIP certified seal. This is basically the overview of all the program rules. Then every year we publish the updates in Cycle 2 and 3 inspection document. Basically what this lists is a change of any rules and policies in the information package or the standards, which are the farming and winemaking rules. And it'll also show the questions that are going to be inspected for those Cycle 2 and 3 documentation and on-site. And then, of course, there's the standards. So these are the sustainable wine growing practices. An applicant can choose to certify their vineyard, their winery, or both. So the standards will cover the rules for all of those practices. In general, when you're documenting these, practices should reflect what you're doing between December 1st and November 30th, unless it says otherwise. There'll be some instances where the question will say practices within the last 12 months. There's 14 different chapters, and the questions are broken out into two different types. We have requirements and we have management enhancements. Requirements must be done in order to get certified, and those are automatically assigned 500 points once you've completed them all. There's also management enhancements, and these have point values assigned to them. You need to have at least 50% of these points less any non-applicable, and that's all calculated for you in the database. So ultimately, once you have all of your requirement points and at least half of your management enhancement points, you need to have at least 75% of the total available points, and again, that is shown in the online database. An important other material to notice is this prohibited materials list. It's available on our website and also in the database, and so these are active ingredients that are not allowed to be used in the vineyard in order to get certified, so it is a requirement. Make sure that you share this with anyone on your property that is making spray decisions. A couple of standards to note for any new applicants in particular. The first one is Standard 111 Conservation Plan. We do have a template available within the database, but we also suggest that you work with an organization like NRCS or RCD to get a really great conservation plan completed. But make sure you contact them early because their schedules do fill up, so you want to make sure that you're contacting them earlier in the year before you're getting into inspection time in June and July. Another thing is question 422, taking a picture of that winter cover crop. You want to make sure you get that done early before it gets mowed or just under if that's part of your practices. There's another great feature in the database that I'll show you in a bit that's a list of all of the pictures that are needed for the program. So you can take that and go out into the vineyard or into the winery and get all of those done at once. It's really convenient. The next two items, 521 and 641, are other questions that you should get on the calendar early. They're the distribution uniformity test and also a well pump efficiency test. 911 is that prohibited materials list again. 912 is pest scouting. So this is for vineyard properties. Make sure you note the specific timing of when you should be scouting for different kinds of pests and keep some sort of a record of that. Usually people like to use a spreadsheet. 913 is sprayer calibration. Make sure you're keeping your records of this. This is a common practice that isn't always documented, but we do require documentation in the certification. Chapter 11 is all about human resources. So if you're working with a management company or a labor contractor, bring them into the loop as you're answering the questions in this chapter, because the intent of the certification is to look at all labor that is working at the property. So those questions should be answered based off of any labor that's being provided there. Question 1117 is about competitive wages. Here's a few different places where you can join a survey to get information on that. And then, of course, the last one is Chapter 14. That's your year-end water and nitrogen use reports. And those are due typically December 15th, but in 2018, December 14th. We'll do a quick review of the costs of the program. So for the vineyard and the winery, there's a one-time application fee of $500 for vineyard team members, $1,000 for non-members. Audits are paid directly to the inspector. They usually charge between $75 to typically more like $125 an hour, sometimes to $175. And the fees for the two programs are based on acreage for vineyard or based on total gallon capacity. So that's capacity of your tanks and your barrels combined at the winery. If you're certifying both, there is a nice discount. So if you're certifying your vineyard and then you're also certifying your winery, you'll get 25% off of those winery certification fees. And certifying your wine. So if you are growing SIP certified fruit, or even if you're purchasing SIP certified fruit, you can actually use that logo on the bottle, which again is a great way to communicate your sustainability at the store shelf. So for any wine that's made with 85% SIP certified fruit, you'll complete a short chain of custody inspection that's usually 1 or 2 hours. That's approved by the Certification Advisory Committee. We'll send you an eligibility letter, and then certification again is paid, is shown with payment of certification fees and final review of bottling records. So the cost for this program, there's no application fee. Audit time is again paid directly to your inspector. It's between $75 and $175 an hour, and that's about 1 or 2 hours. And then certification fees are on a per case basis. So it depends on the number of cases you're certifying for the whole year. So we do aggregate that. Now let's pop into the database. If you're certifying your vineyard or your winery, this is really where you're going to spend most of your time, and all of the information that I just covered previously is also available in the database. So this is the database. The web address is https://app.sipcertified.org. You will have a custom login, which is typically your email and then your own personalized password. And if you have multiple people at your organization working on the certification, we can give you as many logins as you like for the different users, as we call them, for the account. So I'm going to go ahead and click Log In and show you how to use this database. So it's actually very user-friendly. There's only a couple of options. And I'm going to start on some of the basic stuff and then work my way back to certifications, because this is really where you're going to spend most of your time. Up here on the upper right, if you click Log Out, that logs you out of it. But what I'm going to click is right next to it, this word Wine Grower. So that would be your name. Right now this is my mocked up application, so I've named my fake person here Wine Grower. So here, if you wanted to make any changes to your own user login, there's your first name, last name, email, and you could update your password if you need to. And then you always want to click Submit if you make any changes. Over here on the left, if I go down to Contact Info, this is where I could update my address. So if I wanted to edit that, I would click Edit, make my changes in here, and then of course click Save down at the bottom. If I had new contact information over here on the right, I would click that and enter that. Or of course, say this business address became obsolete, I could click Delete and just delete that. Now to go back to the home screen, I'm going to go up here to the upper left and click SIP. That takes me right back home. Let's go over to Properties. Click on that. So this section here shows me any of the vineyards or wineries that I have getting certified. And you'll see across the top, there's this different chain of designations. So vineyards, I can see I have a vineyard that's called Wine Grower 2 and one that's called Wine Grower 3. I'm going to click on wineries, and you can see I have one winery that's being certified as Wine Grower 1. Now, both properties will show you everything all together if you're working with multiple. Owners is if the owner is potentially different than the name of the vineyard or the winery. And the same thing with management company. If you're working with a management company, that would show up here. So let's take a look at a little bit more detail. I've gone back to vineyards, and anything that's blue basically is a link in the database. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Wine Grower number 2. And here you can see this looks a lot like my personal user data, so I can edit information here. So if I had a change in the name of this vineyard and click Submit. Same thing with contact information. So if there was a new mailing address, or if we wanted to add a physical address, we would do Add New Contact Info, or we could always delete something here. Certifications we'll come back to in a little bit. There's actually a better way to get to this from the home page, but this shows you the different years that the property was certified. Users are the people who are able to log in and see this property and make changes in the database. So right now I just have one, but again, we can always add more people if you like. Down here, ranches and blocks and certified acres are combined. So ranches would be used if you had multiple properties that were broken out more than just on the block level. So as you can see here, we have a ranch called SIP 2 and one called SIP 1. If you wanted to delete these, you hit the little trash can. If you had to make changes, I would, again, click on the blue text. So click on SIP 2, and I could change that name here. Where you're really more likely to make changes more frequently is down here on the left under blocks and acres. So you would come into this section if, say, you grafted over an area or if you pulled a portion of the property out and were replanting it. That's when you want to come in here and use this section. So from here, I can see 2018, 2017. I can go back and see all the previous blocks and acres that are certified. And it is important to update this when there are changes because invoicing is based off of your certified acres. So we want to make sure that that's accurate for you. And also, if you're certifying wines, we need to make sure that the records are consistent so that when the auditor goes through the inspection and they're reviewing these blocks and acres, they're going to match up with the wine that the winemaker's making. So here, if I wanted to make a change to this one, I would click on the blue text, the little B here. And so I could choose, if there were multiple ranches to choose from, that would be here. See my block name changed to B1. And we'd updated it to 2 acres now, and then also it's been grafted over to Albarino. So now we have this updated block, and I would click Submit. Now I can go back here. It takes me back to the beginning. If I had to add a new block, you would click that over here on the upper right. And again, you would just choose a ranch, enter a block name, acres, and then pick the varietal and hit Submit. So let's go back home, clicking SIP in the upper left. Now, certifications is, again, where you're going to spend most of your time here on the database. So this is where you document the standards, which are the farming and wine processing rules. So go ahead and click Certification. So up here at the top, I can look at my past years. So right now we're automatically linked to 2018, but I could go back to 2017, see what's been certified before. So this screen gives me an overview of which properties are getting certified. I have 2. So this one at the top, Wine Grower 2, is both a vineyard and a winery, so they're certifying both. And then the second one down here, Wine Grower 3, is a vineyard. And don't worry about that inactive. That's because I haven't technically renewed it, so that shouldn't show up on your end ever. So on this overview, what you'll see is this first column is APPL, that's for application. If you click on that little pencil, this is a snapshot of where you are in certification. So I can see my property type, I'm certifying both, which is vineyard and winery. Certified since 2015. I'm in a cycle year 1. And then where you'll really use is down here at the bottom under inspection. So when it comes to May, you'll want to start scheduling your inspection for June 1st to July 15th. So you would pick a date from this calendar once you'd spoken with your inspector and decide what time you wanted to meet up. So you'd pick your date, and then from the drop-down list, you could pick an inspector, and then you would click Save. And once you do that, your inspector will have access to see your answers in the standards. I'm going to go ahead and go back to this screen. So another spot that's kind of handy to look at is right here under Type. So cycle year and type go hand in hand, and they all have to do with the type of inspection that you have. So I can see that Wine Grower 2 has a full inspection this year. Wine Grower 3 has a documentation and on-site. So that's what that D+O means. If it was just documentation, it would only have a D. And then the cycle year will either be 1, 2, or 3. And that's nice to look at to see if you're in a cycle year 3, then you know you have a full inspection coming up the following year. And then the rest of this gives you information about where you're at in terms of doing documentation. And as you can see, Wine Grower 2 and 3 have a lot of work to do still. We haven't done any of the requirements or the enhancements, so we don't have any points, and our percentage is still 0. So one thing you will notice is as you start to answer all of these requirements, if I had 102 of 103 done, and say I'd answered a bunch of enhancement points and I feel like I should be at 75%, but I'm not. It's still down at 30%. That's because I haven't answered all of the requirements, and the database will not calculate that additional 500 points until you've answered all of those. So do keep that in mind. And so in this instance, when you have a full inspection, this percentage needs to be over 75%. But if I have a documentation or a documentation and on-site inspection, this percentage is going to need to be 100% because you're only answering, in this case, 17 questions. And as you get through inspections, under this inspection report received, you'll see a date pop up here when your inspector has signed it off. Same thing with year-end received. When your inspector reviews those December 15 items, that will show up here. You can also use SIP Certified as a self-assessment. So if you happen to be trialing out the program as an educational tool, we can set you up that way, and then you'd see a little check mark here showing that you were a self-assessment. All right, so let's look at how to actually document in here. I'm going to click on wine grower number 2 with the full inspection. So this page shows you all of the chapters and the certification, and then we also have these handy tools over here on the upper left. So click on Documents, and this is where you can print out copies of the prohibited materials list, the information package, the updates. This year-at-a-glance calendar is great. It's a really nice overview of all of the deadlines and suggestions on when to answer questions in each chapter. And then we also have a user guide, and that's how to use this database, and it has screenshots. It's very comprehensive. You can also print a copy of the full standards, required only questions. This is nice if you're just starting the program for the first time, and it gives you a good overview of the requirements that you need to get done. Here's that photo list. So if you print that out, you'll be able to go out into the vineyard and the winery just once and snap all of your shots in one go. And then also on-site required questions is nice in terms of preparing for your inspection with your auditor. So these are the things that they're going to want to look at on-site. And then if you want to print a copy of your own inspection report, that's up here under Reports. Over on the left again, if I click Instructions, this is a review of the instructions for how to get through SIP Certified. So this is a reminder of the deadlines, how long it should take you on average to maintain it, how the points work in terms of answering requirements and management, and then the different types of inspections themselves. So let's go into the table of contents. So down here at the bottom, there's also this key. So you can see right now there's a bunch of exclamation points next to my chapters, and I also have a couple of check marks. So this will start changing the more questions that you answer, and then it'll change again once your inspector starts coming in here and verifying information. So you'll start seeing the check mark when you've answered everything, and then when your inspector comes back in and they've verified chapters, that check mark is going to show up. And so that says that they verified it and it's good to go and you're done. Right now there's an exclamation point. It says I have insufficient documentation, which means I just have more questions to answer in here. Once the inspector starts doing work in here, you might see question marks, and that just means that they haven't gotten to that section yet. So it gives you a sense of where they are in their progress. The little watermark isn't in use right now, so don't worry about that. And then I'll show you this better in a minute on a different wine grower, number 3, how the documentation and onsite shows up. But for now, we're looking at someone who has a full inspection. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Chapter 1 and get in here and start answering some of these standards. On the left, you'll see if there's any subchapters. So we do have that. We have 1.1. And you can see here the way that this is laid out, there's this big header for requirements. So these are questions that have to be done. And then scroll down a little bit further, and then you'll see another header for enhancements. And you can tell that these have point values assigned to them. That's where you need at least 50% of those points. So going back up to the top, I'll show you how to add files here. So I've read the question. I know how to answer it. I'm going to click Add Files. This takes me into my computer. I know I want this conservation plan, and now it's being uploaded. And then if I had some more information to type in here, I would just type that in, and that's going to complete answering that particular question. And the same thing down here under Enhancements. I did consult with an agency, so I'm going to type that in here, and it was the RCD. And so now I've answered this question. And then whenever I make changes, you need to make sure you go down to the very bottom and click Save Answers before you navigate away. The other thing I want to show you is this bright yellow box that's showing up right now. So that the way that we've mocked this up is that the auditor has already come in and reviewed these standards. So you'll start seeing this in June and July. And what's happened is my auditor says, hey, you answered this question, but you didn't upload your conservation plan. So this is an easy way for you to know what additional items you might be missing when your auditor is going through the inspection. The other couple of icons that you'll see popping up are right here under the question number. So the little leaf means that this is for vineyards. The handshake means that this is an on-site required question, so your inspector is going to look at that on-site. And then you'll also see a camera pop up. That means you can upload a photo for that one. And as we go down a little bit further, we see a couple of these tanks, and that means that this is a winery question. And in this case, it applies to both vineyard and winery. And then if you were doing just vineyard or just winery, these questions that would apply to just one or the other program would be grayed out and blanked out, so you actually wouldn't see these. All right, let's take a quick look at their property. So Wine Grower 3 is a documentation on-site inspection. So when you get into this one, you see the table of contents looks a little bit different. So I have these D+Os and Ds that are showing up here. So because this particular property has a documentation and on-site, that means I want to answer all of the D questions and all of the D+O questions. If you have just a documentation inspection, you will still see the D+O flag, and that's because it's possible that you could be eligible for that impromptu inspection. So we want you to know what those questions are so that you can be prepared. It's usually just a few more questions, so it's not that much more time just to go ahead and take a look at them and make sure that they've been updated and documented. So I'm going to take a click through Chapter 2 and just show you how you can find these questions that are flagged with D or D+O. Again, on the left, the subchapters, I can see these top few are grayed out. That means I don't have to do anything in those. But then I get down here to the bottom, and I see some more Ds popping up. So I'm going to click on the top one, 2.5. And there it is right at the top. So this big purple bar right next to question number 1. So that means I need to answer this question. So I'd upload my files, answer the question, and then, of course, click Save Answer at the bottom of the page. I'm going to go back to properties here, so this is the beginning where I can see everyone that's getting certified. I'm just going to jump back into 2017 and show you how to renew a certification. So this is what you'll do by December 1st of the certification year, and it's very, very simple. So I can see wine grower number 1 needs to be renewed, so I just click on Renew. I'm just going to read through this section here, check them all off, make sure that I've updated my contact information and my blocks and acres if anything has changed there. And then that's it. Type in my initials and click Renew My Certification now. And that's a tutorial on how to use the CIF Certified Database.